Lab at DevNexus 2024. We are back for day 2 of the conference, and I'm very excited to introduce my first guest for this morning, the one and only Sergei Egorov. He's back on the show after being, I think, a couple of times already.
Yep.
And you might remember him as working on test containers in the company called
That's
Atomic
right.
Jars, and stuff happened. Atomic Jar no more, but in a good way. You might heard about that. Atomic Jar was acquired by Docker to give even more strength to test containers and bring it to even more people in a better way. But you know what? I'll let Sergey to talk about that. So, what happened? Why Docker? What's going on? How? What did we miss?
Hey everyone. Well, indeed, the acquisition happened only after 2.5 years of Atomic Jar's existence, but test containers been there for a little longer. In fact, tomorrow it will be 9 years of test containers. Yay!
Yay! Happy birthday!
So there's a cake, by the way. That's not ours; it's DevNexus cake, but we're still thinking that it's somewhat related. So it's not really that unexpected when you think about it, because test containers was driving a lot of Docker usage, being an abstraction on top of Docker, and us being closer to Docker is a win-win situation for the open source community, because we essentially, like, I'm yet to see a win-win situation in open source when there are like two vendors competing for the same user, and the users have to choose which solution to use, especially once they start evolving their product offerings. So us bringing test containers and Docker closer to each other allows us to also remove those weird conversations on whether we should do something or not, whether it will help our company or not our help company.
And
Now the answer is yes.
you're talking about test containers desktop and Docker desktop that were different but became closer and closer as they evolved and started to compete each other, which was weird because both of them are just offerings on top of open source, very related
That's
projects.
right. That's
Okay.
right.
Yeah, no, that
and
makes sense.
We were not staffed enough to be able, for example, to work on some Moby features to improve compatibility with test containers or have some test container specific features there. And frankly, it would be harder to convince them to accept test container specific optimizations, for example, to, let's say, Docker desktop, because we had our own runtime and all that. But now we are just part of one big family, one big, whale family, and we were very welcomed.
And I guess now test containers can utilize all the power of Docker. Well, not as a project because that was open source, but as a company.
That's right. That's right. And we already knew most of them. Those iconic people behind Docker, those who created Docker runtime, formerly known as Docker Runtime, by the way, it's Moby nowadays,
Yep.
like independent open source project. But being able to work with them in the same company was kind of a dream for actually quite a few of them, including myself. And we were just excited to now be part of one family.
That's cool. That's cool. Do you want to share some cool new features, cool stuff that is cooking with test containers? Now we can do more, better, and more exciting stuff when it's part of Docker.
Of course. Like everything I said would be kind of silly if not kind of forward-looking integration plans and ideas of how we integrate, of course. And one of them is those who are using Docker Desktop, for example. Currently, they have to run two applications, like Test Containers Desktop, Docker Desktop, and it's kind of two more things to install, or twice as much things to install. So obviously we'll be bringing Test Containers Desktop functionality to Docker Desktop. We will also be exploring some synergies between the products. So I will give you an example. There's Docker Build Cloud product that allows you to do the same thing we did for test containers with Test Containers Cloud, like offload the thing to the clouds, where it's like powerful machines, to get them on demand, like really cool. So they do it for image building. We have some users in test containers who build images before they start them with test containers. So by integrating Test Containers Cloud or just containers in general with Docker Build Cloud, you have this story, this journey of cloud-powered local development, now also in build, and it's just seamlessly integrating between each other. Or to give another example, Docker Scout, security product, it sounds like something nice to be able to scan what you're doing, with your is your task, like what you're tasked with? Is it really secure what you tasked with? So there's another integration opportunity. But of course, I already kind of mentioned it, doing more on open source between test containers, open source, and Moby, the open source runtime, can lead to some really interesting advancements, unique Docker advancements in the direction of making test containers run better, faster, easier on, say, platforms. Oh, and last but not least, some of you who know me know my opinion on Docker Compose, but it's not because I don't like them, it's because we couldn't really drive some of the Docker Compose roadmap to align it better with how we do it in test containers. Now those teams, they coexist. They sit next to each other. We don't have offices, so virtually sit next to each other. And we can do more together in between Docker Compose and test containers, and we had a module for Docker Compose. Now it's same team.
Yeah, looking forward, it actually all makes sense to do now, and of course everybody will benefit from it. Another topic that I wanted to ask you. So yesterday, day before yesterday, actually, here in Atlanta, co-located with DevNexus, we held our DP Tour Atlanta event, which, for those who didn't hear, kind of a mini DP summits. We have our large DP summit. It was 2 full days in September in San Francisco, but we also have parts of it on the road with a lot of the same great speakers, but obviously more accessible in your area where you live. So day before yesterday we had a tour in Atlanta here, and actually test containers came up. Not surprisingly, as a part of developer productivity engineering discussion, test containers comes up a lot. And in this particular talk, it was Roberto Perez from Netflix. He spoke about how companies use test containers to shift their culture from testing in production, and this was very Netflix, right? They invented code monkeys and they did a lot of stuff in production to actually more cautious approach to it's not that they wanted to test in production, right? They didn't have a lot of choice.
Don't we all test in production?
And we don't do it because we're evil and we want to make the users our testers. It's just because it's impossible to test at such scale, for example, as Netflix or as any big company. And as company grow larger and there is more data, it becomes more difficult to test in production, not in production, because it's almost impossible to recreate the production environment reliably enough.
Oh yeah.
And if your staging environment it's not like production environment, you just waste time and money testing something that is not the real deal.
Okay.
But fascinatingly, Roberto mentioned that they actually managed. And they managed thanks to test containers, and this is something that I would like to hear more about from your side.
Before I talk about that, like a real quick one, like developer productivity events is, I'm Christmas baby, so I got to choose my own birthday. I have multiple one of them. Like each time I attend developer productivity event, I'm just like, it's mini birthday. Like I'm really enjoying them.
It is a great event. Yeah.
It is. Just like same-minded people, and I'm glad that it's growing. Now we have a tour. So
we have a tour.
Maybe one day I'll be invited too.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, keeping this shameless plug, the super early bird tickets are available now for September for San Francisco.
See you there.
And on tour, we did Seattle, we did Dallas, coming up New York, Boston, DC, London, Berlin. If you are close to any of those places, or you can come in September to the Real Deal in San Francisco, do that. It's a great event, and you will meet Sergei in person.
And I'll meet you there in person. So
Win-win.
Make sure to come. But on the topic of testing, indeed, Netflix is famous for doing testing in production. They do it the right way, obviously, and all those practices of chaos testing, canaries, and others, they are all adopted at Netflix, or some of them nearly created at Netflix. So they clearly know what they're doing. That's for sure. But then you have a challenge of, for example, log4j vulnerability happens, and now you need to update 4,000 projects all at once, and need to be confident that your update won't break anything. And how do you get that confidence? Like, you don't have staging environments. I don't think anyone in the world knows how to create staging version of Netflix, because imagine how big it is. You all can find those diagrams of how many microservices there are, how they interact with each other. So it's obviously not possible, let alone ephemeral staging environments. So for them, the challenge is, how do we, and Roberto also did a talk yesterday on updating Gradle at scale, and how they build custom distribution of it, and how they submit pull requests to each project and then automatically merge when the tasks pass, with some linting, with some testing, and all that. So unless you have tasks that can be executed locally, as in locally on laptop or locally on CI at the pull request stage, not after you merge, not after you package, not after you deploy it to staging, at the pull request stage, thousands of pull requests at once, then you don't really get that confidence, like enough confidence to push to production. And when we talk about test containers, we never say that it gives you 100% confidence. Never. You always have to hear from the users, you always have to do some testing in production, but the goal here is to have enough confidence to push to production. And by doing testing in development, by shifting testing to the left, pardon my marketing, that's how we gain that confidence. That's how we get this feedback, this green check mark that means something, like meaningful test result, meaningful confidence that allows us to push to production.
And of course it's not perfect, right? Because as we just mentioned, nothing actually can represent production with a 100% level of confidence. But the more you do, which is meaningful, the more confidence you get that you will know that you'll probably break something, but let it be as small as possible. And test
my
containers
favorite
help that.
rule of testing is that if you feel that you're doing something wrong, you're doing something wrong. Like if you're mocking something that feels like, okay, we should just start a real database, you should just start a real database. If you're mocking external service that has a very rich API, even if you mock it at network level, you're probably doing it at the wrong stage. You have to do it on staging or in production. So it's a very easy rule, and trust your gut on that. And previously we couldn't really do some of it because we didn't have the right tools for that. So yeah, I know that I'm doing wrong things in memory database, but what can I do? And by the way, like 10 years ago or even more, I wrote a Maven plugin that starts Redis before and after executing integration tests. So even before test containers, I was exposed to testing topic. But then like I knew that I'm doing something not right because it's still in memory Redis in Java implemented by Sam Perala, who is a fantastic engineer, so I trusted him. But nevertheless,
it's not the same.
It's not the same Redis.
It's not the same Redis. Exactly.
Now with test containers, we just start Redis.
Yep, the same Redis that you. So basically, you test containers gives you more tools to do something that will be as close to production as possible.
Yeah.
It's not 100% right thing, right? Because you don't have all the data, you don't have all the load, you don't have the exact parameters, the exact environment, you don't allocate it as much memory, you don't load it with the same load. So it's not 100% perfect, but it's much closer to the real deal than mocking or even having other lightweight implementation that you will use in testing. This is as close as you can get.
100% right. And we try to be the solution that is not magic, because there are so many magical solutions in the market. Ephemeral environments that just like pointed to your production Kubernetes definitions that will create ephemeral environment for you. I mean, it sounds cool, really. I would love to use such tool, should it exist. Because all the tools that exist, they always have this asterisk. It's just like, unless you're using this, unless you're using that, unless blah, 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 blah. And like there is always magic involved. Or route your traffic from production to your development environment. Okay, sounds cool. None of us want to route outgoing traffic because we don't want to send, requests to Stripe and payment gateways and all of that. So there are always limitations.
Of course.
But if you're not using magic, because magic does not exist in this world, unfortunately, and unicorns are just horses with like fancy things connected to their head. So we try to avoid magic, and this is why test continues. It's the least magical tool on the market.
That do the most close thing to the real deal. Absolutely.
That's what we try to do.
That makes sense. Sergei, thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
as always.
And we'll see you very soon in probably like about an hour with our next interview in Build Propulsion Lab at DevNexus 2024. Stay tuned. Thank you. Bye bye.